Very good afternoon to all the students, Dr. Jha, my colleagues, and once again I welcome you all to the JSIA webinar series 2020. Uh, Today's topic of the webinar is Understanding Global Power Configurations, and this will be presented by Dr. Pankaj Jha, who happens to be an associate professor at the School of International Affairs. Again, we would love to take questions from you regarding the topic. So I would request you to just park your questions till the end so that we can take it after the presentation. And if you have any questions which are non-academic, I would be happy to answer them for you. With this, I would request Dr. Jha to start with this presentation, please.
Thank you, Ridwan, and thank you, team, for organizing this webinar. We are in a very strange times, and anxiety is right in our minds with regard to lockdown and when this whole issue will get resolved, when we will find the vaccine. While these also ring a bell in our minds that how this whole global power configuration is really going to take shape post the pandemic. But before really talking about pandemic and all those things which are the usual the reading material for you throughout the day, I will talk about how these global power configurations have really shaped over a period of time. Now, when you look into power, what exactly really comes to your mind? It's the power in terms of muscle. Is it a power in terms of brain? Is it a power in terms of managing things? Is it the power with regard to your money? Is it the power with regard to your clout and all those aspects of it? Or when you translate it into the national stage, what exactly is power? Whether it's politics, whether it's economics, whether it's military, whether it's technology, whether it's culture. When we talk about power, then with regard to culture, there is a term which is being increasingly being talked is known as soft power. So it shows that even culture do have an influence on the mind itself. Now, when you look at the word, we are now nearly 215 political units. As a nations, we are 195 or so. But in terms of political units, which includes islands which have affiliated to other nations and seen as a subsidiary or a surrogate state to many of these nations, including US and many of their colonial masters, then what kind of a global power configuration are we looking into? What exactly are the templates where we can evaluate this global power scenario and what exactly is really happening? Is Europe getting weakened over a period of time and it's the Asian century? Or is the Asian century just a metaphor or a rhetoric which has been increasingly used to push the manufacturing, the trade, the investment into this largely young population which is there existent in Asia? If you look into the history, international history itself, the Second World War created US as a big power because of the fact of the thing that it conducted nuclear attack on Japan and also decimated the only Asian power at that point of time in Asia itself, which was Japan as such. Questions have been raised that whether in terms of power configuration, the same kind of attack would have been launched by US had there been Germany instead of Japan, or was it a ploy to decimate an Asian power which was a threat to the Western dominance, or would have likely to be a threat to the Western dominance in the coming years or so. Now, if you look into this whole power itself, it is a relationship between classes, military, ideological aspects, and this also shows the correlation of forces. When we used to have two powers, the US and the Soviet Union, the whole configuration revolved around this ideological aspect of it, which is communist country and which is a capitalist countries and their affiliations thereby. And the interesting part was that US and Soviet were the so-called umbrella providers in terms of nuclear safety to most of the nations which subscribe to their ideological lines of thought. Now, what has happened over a period of time, that's the strength of this global power has shifted from nuclear to many other aspects of it, be it economic, be it demography, be it population, or the role of a nation or a group of nations together under different circumstances. And therefore, you see that one thing which really happened in the global politics was the emergence of non-aligned movement, which showed that there can be a new power center, which can be a group of countries getting together and really denouncing this whole power block politics. Nowadays, if somebody really talks about NAM, it is seen that the non-aligned movement has died the day when Soviet Union ceased to exist. Also, if you look into it, there has been different kind of configurations which are emerging. China, which is now the culprit with regard to Wuhan virus, and not divulging the details with regard to the casualties and the strain of the virus which have germinated in Wuhan, is now increasingly economic power. But now its economic power is also under threat with regard to its linkages through trade, investment, and the ones everyone really talks about it is the One Belt, One Road, or the Belt and Road Initiative, through which China wanted to integrate its production centers with the trading zones and trading ports so that it can increase its influence even when it is not the complete on the top of the production ladders, which means the economies of the scale, the efficiency of production really erodes over a period of time with regard to China. If you look into it, this economic power of China made it a very formidable military power also, because then it can really purchase weapons, equipments, and all those things which can challenge the dominant power, which is US nowadays after the disintegration of Soviet Union. But the questions have been asked, does China have the so-called wherewithal with regard to intellectual rights, with regard to research, with regard to technology, which is required to make it a superpower at the global stage, or it is just nudging America to cede some territory, some strategic space to China so that it can capture it. Once again, the whole debate is between the Asian power and the Western power and how they will configure each other in this regard. Now, if you look into it, there is a different kind of configurations which are going on in the global power scenario. If you look into the economics, you have US, which is still very much an economic power. You have Germany, which is a big economic power in the Europe. Then you have UK, which has ceased to exist as a European Union member. And then you have Japan, which is still an economic power, but not so big a formidable one, but still is good enough with regard to really, investment, with regard to trade and all those aspects of it. On the other hand, if you look into the military configurations itself, which is quite interesting, is that you find US, which is the hegemon, which is the so-called security guarantor for many of the small states, its allies, as well as strategic partners. But then you have Russia. Whenever you talk about Russia, you need not discount it Russia as a completely forgotten power. It is one country which will always aspire to regain its position and will try everything to be the second most formidable power at the global stage. And then you have China, which wants to be the superpower but is not getting the due credit. And one of the reasons is the fact that China doesn't have too many friends. All of those who are really abiding by China's diktat is because of the checkbook diplomacy that China is really forging with many of the nations which are weak in terms of loan, in terms of getting some provisions with regard to their infrastructure and all those things. So therefore, it is critical that the China will have to nudge its way to be a superpower as per the template which has been really emphasized by the Western powers, that what exactly should be the configuration with regard to be a superpower as such. Now, also you look into it, there are many other powers which are in the range of middle powers. Now, what exactly, when we talked about superpowers, great powers, and all those things, what exactly is this whole concept which is known as mid powers? And what exactly is this whole term which is known as swing state? If you look into it, we have come across that middle powers in international relations are those powers which hold a position in the international power configuration, but which is in the middle between the great power and the superpowers, and they have a significant influence over all other states, and are sufficient and have sufficient ability to shape the turn or the debate or the discourse in the international relations or the international affairs or pertaining to global security. Now, what exactly are these so-called middle powers, if you configure them as middle powers, which are below the great and superpower, but do have significant influence in international affairs? We might call it Vietnam, which has a large population, as one of the middle powers. We might call Indonesia, which has a very large 17,000 island archipelago, as a middle power, which has sufficient resources, which has sufficient economic heft, and which has sufficient demographic clout to be one of the middle powers. Australia also counts itself as one of the middle powers, and in fact, this whole term was propagated by Australia, which says that they are a significant middle power per se as such. Then in Africa, you see that South Africa, which is the white man in the black African continent, and Nigeria, which again emerge as a significant middle powers because they have the economic resources, they have the continental clout with regard to influence over the countries in that particular continent, and also these middle powers are aligning one time with US or one time with China so as to fulfill their national interest and their needs for the future. Brazil again is another middle power which is rising rapidly in it. Now, apart from that, these regional powers, those at times there is overlap between middle powers and the regional powers, which means those powers which hold a significant clout in the regional spheres, and this might include like Israel, which is a regional powers in terms of military acumen, economy, and all those aspects. Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Iran also. You must not discount Iran by the very fact that it has suffered sanctions and all those things. Iran has persevered and gone through a lot of hardships and all those things, that it wants to strive. It wants to be a regional power which have some international clout, some international say in affairs. Now, these kind of powers do bring about a kind of a sanity in the international relations, and also bring about a balance in the international relations as such. Then the one question that really comes to the mind is, how will you take India, whether it's a superpower, whether it's a middle power, whether it's a swing state, what a kind of a state India is. If you look into it, there has been a lot of narrative, lot of discourses which have come across, and which says that India is a swing state because if it goes and really have a very friendly relations with China, it disturbs the Asian power configuration, because then US, Japan, and Australia, and all those things find this India China configuration because of their demographics, because of their young population, because of their potential for trade, investment, resources, are a big power center per se as such. Also, if you look into it, India also have tried to be a superpower, but the problem is that many people say that India is a hesitant superpower. India is a superpower which is yet to define its responsibility, duties, and claim its space in the international sphere. Now, India is trying to really look into much more better ways to really enhance its image. But over a period of time, what we have seen that what India says, what India does, has been noted by many of the countries across the world, because India does act as one player which has the best of the relations with Iran, with Saudi Arabia, with Israel, and you name it. And this kind of a deft diplomacy which is being done by our diplomats, by our statesmen, by our political leaders, critically enhances the image of India and makes it one of the power centers which is very critical with regard to many of these defining moments. Now, when you look with regard to the developments which is happening, or very recently, there were that when China has been castigated, that look, China is responsible for so-called Wuhan virus, is not sharing the strains of the virus. So, and there is not much knowledge with regard to the pathogens and the origins of this virus itself. It is very difficult for the international community as well as scientists to devise or innovate or research with regard to the antibodies or the medicine which is required to counter this kind of a virus. Earlier also, China has tried to really hide H5N1, the swine flu virus, bird flu virus, to not to share the strains of the virus with any of the international community, and which raises the serious questions about what exactly are the intentions of China as such, whether it's a responsible stakeholder in the international politics, or it's still a country which is somewhere between its communist ideals and the basic template which is required to be a responsible power, is that it should have a democracy. Somewhere it tries to really navigate itself as a power which wants to be a global power per se as such. In that case, when the China has been castigated, Chinese leaders reached out to India that they should really support them, work out a solution in this regard. And while on the other hand, US and other countries, European countries, have been seeking that India should be really taking a side whenever they are really going to discuss aspects related to the Wuhan virus, its origins, and how China should really collaborate and cooperate with the international community. Now, this kind of a what is called the global power fulcrum, which we have seen over a period of time and which is happening with regard to India, is interesting, and it's very fulfilling for a country where people like you and me are sitting down studying international relations, that we do have a say in international politics, and which is very good. The other aspect that I really wanted to talk about it, whether this whole case of pandemics have brought down the relevance of nuclear powers, because now you see most of the nuclear powers are really trying hard to protect their citizens and provide certain medical and health facilities to all of them. And these nuclear missiles have become irrelevant because the nuclear power, which could have changed the balance of power during Second World War, when Japan was attacked with nuclear bombs, and the whole configuration and the whole status of the Second World War changed drastically. Then it is seen that whether nuclear power is the most desired status symbol, or it's lost its relevance over a period of time. What do you see nowadays is there are de facto, which means they, by the power itself, they have vested themselves as the nuclear powers, which includes India, Pakistan, and Israel as such. And then you have new powers which are emerging on the horizons, which include North Korea, which is again every now and then trying to really conduct missile tests and nuclear tests and say that, look, I'm knocking at the nuclear doors. Or those who are due jure, which means legitimized, legalized nuclear powers, which is the P5 countries of United Nations Security Council, China, Russia, US, UK, and France, and how they are really going to bargain, navigate, and protect their larger international interest and national interest in this kind of a configuration. Then again, we come to a very critical part, which is very important and which is a very big defining thing in the coming years. Whether this biological chemical warfare, because of this Wuhan virus, it will open new areas, new vistas of warfare, where biological agents, pathogens will be used to inflict damages or cause damage to the adversaries per se as such. Or the one important factor, which again is going to define the global power politics, is technology. Whether technology will be the wild card, which will define the power of the countries as such. Whosoever have the best of the technologies will define power and will have an edge, even if there is a war, which might be of a third kind, where robots, where cyborgs, all kinds of things which you used to see in science fiction movies might be coming to the reality. Whether this technology will be the game changer, or whether these pandemics, bioterrorism, or bioagents will be a game changer over a period of time. What we have seen in the last few decades, 2 to 3 decades, is the fact that since 1975, after the Vietnam War, thereafter the Iraq, thereafter the Afghanistan, US is losing its identity and a relevance with regard to a very formidable global power, because in all those regional theaters it might have achieved some amount of success, but in most of the parts it has lost its soldiers. It has to retreat back, and in Afghanistan, it is after so many years of being there in Afghanistan, it is seeking a way out to be out of this quagmire situation, so that it can protect its soldiers who have been deployed in this country for near about 2 decades as such. Now, in this regard, there has been talk with regard to the term which is known as Indo-Pacific, the Indo-Pacific security, Indo-Pacific strategy, where US wants that few countries should align with US, serves its interests, so that the global constabulary role that US is playing can be reduced to a certain extent, and the cost which is involved with its constabulary role should be also reduced, because now Trump is asking its partners and allies to share burden with regard to in terms of cost, deployment of troops, and all those things. And it gets interesting that whether this whole alliance business, the whole partnership business will be a money affair, or it will be purely on economic terms. And also, you look into it, this ethics and international cloud, China really have faced a lot of criticism, a lot of of statements from the leaders that they are really trying to really put China in the corner, and even Germany has asked for reparations for the damages that the Wuhan virus has done to their economy, to the lives of the people, and all those things. Now, again, this whole thing of the Asian power and the Western powers and who dominates comes into the being. China is the culprit, there is no doubt about it. But how and which way this global power configuration will shape in near future is a matter to debate. Also, you look into this role of the multilateral institutions, because when the BRICS, which is a grouping of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, came into being, it was seen as a challenge to the normal, financial global institutions which have been dominated by the West itself. And therefore, it is increasingly seen that these kind of a la carte institutions, whether they will challenge the Western dominated order, or it will define a new converging ground or a synthesis between Western dominated and Asian dominated power configuration per se as such. Now, also, you need to take into account that whether when we are discussing all those things, this whole issue of power needs a redefinement and redefinition of this concept itself, so that we can look into whether power is purely from military point of view, or there are other elements which are really should be embedded into this whole definition of power, whether it's politics, whether it's population, whether it's demographics, whether it's economy, whether it's trade, whether it's investment. What kind of a power we are going to see in the near future? Because every country, be it a great power where it is aspiring power like China, whether it's the middle powers, Vietnam, Indonesia, Australia, Korea, all these kind of middle powers do have a say, or you find new kind of a grounds which will be broken with regard to finding the most best global equilibrium, which means there is a kind of a balance which is created between powers, so that they accept that this is the role in their global power configuration, and also this is the hierarchy they will accept with regard to this global power configuration which is emerging at the global stage at this point of time. I will rest my case over here, because and I will urge all of you to look into one of the books which is wonderfully done, which is International Security by Peter Haw, and it talks about how international security, how global power configurations are going to shape up, and how issues like climate change, food, water, and all those things will figure very prominently into it. And there is also this aspect that health, which has been completely denounced by most of the powerful nations, will look into health with a new prism, with a new sense of responsibility. And this whole term which came into being during the Libyan crisis, that there should be responsibility to protect with regard to civilians, this responsibility to protect will also take shape, will also find its footing when we talk about health and the protection of the citizens, primarily human security. So this whole configuration, which will oscillate between state powers, social power, and also the power that the humans have with regard to defining their own interest and their own priorities in the larger scheme of things at international level. I rest my case over here. Thank you for listening to me, and thank you. I will be willing to take on questions related to the subject. Thank you. Over to you, Riddhiman. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jha. I think it's a very interesting topic, and I think we all need to go back and read a little about what has happened and what is expected after this lockdown is lifted, and how the world economy reacts to it. So yeah, we need to see what is happening in the near future. With this, I would now. I already have some questions, and I will take the first question. This is by Ashriya. The question is, the recent acquisition of HDFC shares by China and the restriction thereafter imposed by India is going to have long-lasting implications in Asia. Do you agree with this? And what's your take on this, sir?
Basically, if you look into this, mergers and acquisitions, there is always a national security thing which is embedded into it. Since I had worked into the national security establishment at one point of time, I can say you that with regard to China's acquiring certain stakes, equities in Indian companies, it is always seen with a fine lens. That what exactly is the entity which is trying to procure that kind of shares? What exactly is the linkages with the Chinese political establishment or Politburo per se? And we know that these kind of things has been done by China to to in a way influence the economy and the dynamics. If you look into it, China's 5G network provider, which is Huawei, has been trying very hard to get into Indian market. But there is a technical hold which has been imposed by the national security establishment, saying that allowing the entry of this Huawei into India's 5G network will expose few of the vulnerabilities of the Indian telecommunication network, and also provide a spy linkages with these providing data and information of the Indian consumers to many of these Chinese establishment as such. Even if you look into Zoom app, it has been raised certain suspicions with regard to its operations, and also it's providing few of the users data to these things. In fact, the best part that if India has taken a due cognizance of this is the fact that there might be certain checks and balances which might be taking shape now, and few of the shares that China has acquired itself is not of a very large nature, but then we will be taking due cognizance of it and making amends to the rule. And every country does have the right to make amends to the rule, be it by the international trade laws or by the national security legislation which is existing in India. I rest my case over here. Thank you, Shreya.
Thank you so much, sir. My next question, in fact, there are two questions by Mugdha. And the first question is in this scenario of emerging centers of power, what is the importance of other emerging economies like India? So that's the first one. The
One
second,
of yeah, okay.
yeah, and I
Mhm.
should I take the second question after you answer the first one?
Yeah, it will be better. Otherwise, I will forget. Okay, what exactly is the
Sure, sir.
role
Please
of
go ahead.
India with regard to the with regard to? You want to say something, Ridhiman? Should I continue?
So I will.
Hello.
Yes, sir. Please continue.
Okay. Now, if you look into India's into this whole economic configuration, how it's emerging and the economies, in fact, when you look into it, India has still need to do certain, corrections with regard to its economic liberalization measures, and this include with regard to a number of issues, with regard to labor laws, with regard to copyright, with regard to intellectual property rights, and all those things, so that it can really elevate itself to be a priority economy for many of these foreign direct investors. What has happened? Foreign direct investors are investing, including foreign direct private investors, as well as institutional investors are investing in India and making a swift money and just getting out from this whole thing. Now, if you look into this whole thing of India's equity market really galloping, is because of the fact that India is seen as the one place where most of the economies will try to shift their production, and India might be gaining because of this default situation which is emerging at that point of time. Indian economy is good, is sound, but the problem is in terms of manufacturing, we are still yet to make great strides. Our services sector is excellent. It contributes near about 60% to our gross domestic product. And also, we need to hook up with regard to our primary industries which are there. We are primarily what kind of a thing? We are exporting raw materials. We are exporting iron ore. We are exporting these kind of things to countries like China, which are really finishing it and selling it back to us. Now, that kind of a thing we have to overcome if we want to become a formidable economy and a sound political framework and willingness is really required at this juncture itself. In fact, what has happened because of this opposition and the ruling government priorities, there is always tug of war with regard to certain issues like land acquisition, with regard to infrastructure development, and all those things. This we will have to really sit down and bring about a consensus that if we want to develop very strongly, we will have to put aside the political differences on these issues and find a way out. And this will help generating employment and helping people. Politicizing this economic aspects of it is doing no good to our economy as such. Because in terms of core fundamentals, where we are seen democracy, education, population, we completely fit the bill. But with regard to economic liberalization and liberalizing the market, we are yet to make a mark. I hope in the next 10 odd years we will understand the gravity of the situation and make certain amends. And I'm very positive about it. Thank you. Next question, Ridhiman.
Yeah, the next question from Mukta is what are the different ways in which the emerging centers of powers, like India or any other state where it's just emerging, can avoid the hegemony of the hegemon?
Okay. Now, if you look into it, everybody is really toying with India being on their side. China, when you see the coming of the summit level meetings with Xi Jinping or Trump coming to India. In fact, India has become the most handsome guy on earth, and everybody is wanting to get married to India itself, to say it in a very crude terms. Because the thing is that India does have that aura in terms of economy, aura in terms of capacities, and all those things. But India, what it says there are two basic tenets of India's approach to it, which says the first, from foreign policy perspective, is Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam, which means the whole world is a global family and we are relatives as such. The second aspect, which is seen as it, multi-alignment. I might be friends with China, I might be friends with Israel, I might be friend with Iran, I might be friend with US per se, I might be best of the friends with Russia also. Now, this kind of a deft diplomacy and addressing core national security concerns rather than taking sides has helped us in a long run. Because if you look into it, we are friendly with Saudi Arabia also, we are very friendly with Iran also. Now, how we are managing it and how our diplomats are doing it, how our political leadership is really trying to make ends meet in this regard is commendable thing, and let's accept this in this regard. Our basic motto is multi alignment, and we will do whatever is best for our national interest. And that's why we are relevant, because once we align with one particular country as such, we will lose our relevance with regard to the opposite side, because they will think that we are the another what is called surrogate state or an alliance partner with any major power center per se as such. Thank you. Next one, Ridiman.
Thank you so much, sir. My next question is by Dilip Goel. His question is, what is India's prospects to become world leader after COVID-19, since there is a vacuum created by the leadership of US?
If you want to be a global leader, there are few aspects you really have to look into it. First is what you have to give to the world. Yes, in terms of providing medicines, hydroxychloroquine, India did, gained some international goodwill, and also that it can be a very good provider of services and medicine in near future. The second aspect is that with regard to that platform which India has got, how much it can capitalize on it with regard to developing this whole economy at a faster pace, which can be not exactly equal match to China, because China, most of the production is done through state subsidization, which is not possible in the case of India. Second, with regard to labor rights, labor laws, India is much more liberal in that concept, because it cannot allow its labor to work for 18 to 20 hours in factories. If you look into the condition of the Apple iPhone factories in China itself, it is very deplorable. But then, what exactly is the requirements from the international community so that they invest in India, be it under Make in India initiative or Digital India, all kinds of things? Are we meeting that same criteria or the template which is required for that matter? In fact, in this regard, I believe the whole India should be really aware of it, should address what exactly are its economic priorities, what exactly are its political achievement over a period of time, and how it is going to cater to the global demand which is coming from different corners of the world. Can India create that conducive environment in terms of economic that most of these countries would like to invest in India? That we will have to say. Because if you look into our infrastructure with the electricity, with digital connectivity, all those things, we are way notches below many of these, developing countries in Asia itself. In terms of research and innovation, we are not investing that much in research and innovation. In terms of providing infrastructure support, in terms of developing port network, in terms of all those bureaucratic hurdles that we have ourselves have created, And you will be astonished to know that with regard to one foreign direct investment, if somebody wants to really come to India and establish an industry or a factory, he has to get near about 35 clearances from different ministries. Can't we have a single video system where we can address it, and within 30 minutes or 1 hour, the person has all the clearances right on his table? That kind of an approach we will have to adopt. Only then we will fulfill the criteria to be a developing economy and a global superpower. With regard to military and all those things also, we will have to work with regard to higher allocation for military expenditure, which is way below 2%. Because if you want to really rise as a military power, your allocation should be near about 3%, so that you can replace your old weapon systems, old ships, old aircraft, and thereby work with regard to more advanced weaponry, better smart soldiers. Only then you can really gallop into the superpower league. Otherwise, you will have to address this inertia, bureaucratic inertia. You will have to address this inherent lacunae in the establishment before you can go at the global stage and declare that you are an equal stakeholder and a responsible power at the global forums. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Our next question is from Shavya. Her first question is, what will be the future of multilateralism after the crisis? And second is, do you see SARC 2.0 becoming effective to deal with security issues in South Asia?
The first, with regard to the multilateral institutions as well, you find these institutions, if you look into the whole history of institutions, G77, G85 failed to really reach the milestone because the membership was very big. Now, if you look into the G20 and look into the responses that they have given with regard to pandemics, they said they are helpless because this is one area which is beyond their thought process that they can really address this kind of a things. I believe with regard to multilateralism, like BRICS and all those things, the thing will be there, but in terms of relevance, in relevance with regard to addressing these global issues, even UN will come under severe stress because it cannot really, you criticize openly China with regard to the work that it has done with regard to pandemics, and therefore all these institutions will see severe scrutiny. Now, what exactly will happen? Those regional institutions which address regional concerns, which provide regional security, and others will be seen as a better option than UN. Once again, many institutions which are big in size, which have a larger mandate, like APEC, or for that matter, BRICS or G20, will have to find a niche area, a very focused areas where they can provide something. Otherwise, if they address all kinds of things under the umbrella, then they will find it difficult to choose and also prioritize with regard to their things. In fact, many other institutions, given the fact that the pandemic has been seen with a lot more concern, I think many of these institutions will have to look into whether it's a superpower which should be at the helm of affairs or be the influencing body in these institutions, or the role of smaller and middle powers should be encouraged so that there is a balance and neutrality which is involved. In fact, now what has happened, the multilateral institutions, their neutrality, their relevance is increasingly under stress. Now, if somebody wants to buttress this importance of this institution, it will have to reformat, it will have to rework about the priorities and the agenda of these institutions. That's your first question. The second question is that whether SAR 2.0 will be a viable option or not. If you look into it, one of the alternatives which have been created with regard to SARC was BeamStech, Bay of Bengal Community for Technical and all those things, which is there. BeamStech has been much more driven by Thailand, India, and all those countries to gain certain relevance and importance. In fact, what has happened that in BeamStech, India is a bigger power. Thailand has got some economic clout, but rest others are poor nations. Now, if you look into the SARC 2.0, the initiative which has been taken with regard to health, with regard to developing infrastructure and all those things is commendable. But the thing is that whether SARC 2.0 should omit Pakistan, or without Pakistan there is no SARC 2.0. In fact, that is the biggest question which everybody will have to address in this context. And I believe strongly that if Pakistan doesn't recover very strongly after the pandemic, I think Pakistan relevance in the SAR 2.0 will be something to debate about. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Uh, I have my next question from Divyanshu. His first question is, how do I prepare for MADLB entrance test? Divyanshu, I would request you to please get in touch with our admissions counselor, Ms. Shetna, and if also you could get in touch with me or with Ms. Nandini Uchil. We would like to give you guidance in terms of the entrance test. So please connect with us after this forum. Devanshu's second question is regarding the oil crisis, which is actually helping the superpowers because they are able to, SRP, uh, and they are able to benefit out of this oil crisis. However, do you think India has missed out on this opportunity?
If you look into it, India has already tried to develop three dumps, or crude oil dumps, with the help of many of these West Asian countries. And of course, it should have done some thinking with regard to purchasing oil, because usually there is always a 2 to 3 months gap with regard to orders and delivery. India should have done something with regard to it. But the problem also is with regard to how far and what exactly is the price that India believes is the more stable price. Because if, let's say, I buy the crude oil at $30 a barrel now, and suddenly 15 days henceforth I find the same crude oil is $15 a barrel, which means there is no stability, then I am losing about $15 per barrel because I took an advanced decision with regard to purchasing crude oil. Now, this whole oil economy is very fragile. There is no what is called the demand supply equilibrium which has been achieved, and I believe that it will be better if there is a stability aspect of it which is being explored, and if the oil prices are stabilized at a very comfortable price, then we might take a decision. Because if suddenly the OPEC and as well as Russia try to really truncate down this oil production, then there will be a rise in prices, and then again this whole process of how to find a stable prices to really negotiate it, to be negotiated, is a big issue in this regard. Most of the countries, America, they have that shale gas. They are trying to export shale gas and all those things to us, and we are looking into what exactly is the best basket of crude oil that we can procure, whether we can should procure from Latin American countries, whether we should procure from Russia, whether we should procure from oil. Because not a what has happened, and this is being told by Iranian scholars, that the pain that we suffered once when our oil tankers were all around the globe and nobody was trying to buy the oil from us because we were under sanctions regime. The same pain is felt by all the oil producing nations, because now the tankers are at large at sea and nobody is purchasing oil. The thing is that whether this energy thing, critical thing, is the lasting thing that we should think about it, or there should be an option for us to look for a better viable methods for securing our energy future as such. Maybe electronic cars or renewable energy, which might serve us in the long run. How this oil economy really pans out in the coming days or not is for anybody's to really think about it. Yes, we missed a lot, but then it's a political decision which need to be taken at the right time, I would say, on this. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. My next question is from Sumlata Chaitanya, and her question is on, she wants to know what soft power is and how India uses its soft power in diplomacy. Maybe if you can recommend a book to her, which she can read in terms of soft power, and on this forum, if you could just brief her a little bit about what soft power and how it's being used in diplomacy.
If you look into the soft power, it was a term which was coined by Joseph Nye, and Joseph Nye has a book and an article also which talks about soft power. Basically, it's the power which influences. It is through cultural and other means which are very latent in terms of approach. Films, food, cuisine, interactions, culture, and all those things which are very latent in thing, but they do have an influence over developing relationship with nations. Like if I have a very bad relationship with China, this soft power, which is the track to power, people to people interaction, and all those things, help us to find bridges to undertake building relationship. And if you look into India's approach towards, there are institutions which have been developing this soft power business in a ways like scholarship, fellowship, India chairs all across the world. And this is there is one institution which is known as Indian Council for Cultural Relations, which main focus is to develop cultural ties between countries. And you see across, if you look into different Indian embassies, each of them have a cultural attaché, a Rabindranath Tagore Center, or a Vivekanand Center, or a Gandhi Study Center, or an India Center, which develops these interaction with the citizens and develop this kind of a soft power, film festival, trade fairs, all those things which are being done so that the people should understand India. If you look into this larger, if you are interested into civilizationals and influence, you will find Indic civilization, which particularly means India. India's influence spanning from Egypt, Central Asia to Southeast Asia, far reaches of it. And you will find the artifacts, temples, architecture, which shows how much influence India had at that point of time. Now the thing is that this kind of a thing which is can be cultivated through soft power films, television approach, shows, all those things have always been a what is called approach which have been adopted by many of these our embassies and high commissions across these countries. And we want to engage and interact with people, because when people feel very good about a country itself, that's where, when you create that kind of a soft power and the influence in the minds of the people. In fact, soft power is very latent, but it's very influential among the people, because that is the what is called the track 2 and track 3 level of interaction that we develop with the people of that particular country. Thank you. I hope I have resolved your thinking. Look into this Joseph Nye's book on soft power. That will the best reference material for you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. I will take two more questions because we are already we, covered the time. My next question out here is from Yutan Sonia. Uh, the question is, will this pandemic reinforce the already emerging trend of nationalism politics worldwide?
If you look into nationalism, nationalism germinates because of certain factors which give or ingrain into you that being Indian or being Chinese or something like that. This whole pandemic will create three major issues which I want to highlight. I should not be what is called the naysayer in the whole academic circles, but I believe there might be a penalizing action on China in diplomatic ways, political way, or even military way, which is due. The second thing which we might see is anti-Chinese riots in many of the Asian countries, and which we have seen in 65, 66, when China really tried to feed this communist fundamentals into few of these countries because of their communist parties affiliates in these countries, and then we saw anti-Chinese riots. This might be very much possible. The third aspect which is going to come across with in the post-pandemic phase is the fact that there will be more collaboration, more cooperation in the health domain. And this is a very strange thing, and I am very astonished to see into it. Many of the nations don't want to share the strains of the virus with the other countries because they believe that after developing a medicine or an antidote, they will capitalize on it and sell medicines at a very higher cost, and will gain a lot with regard to this strain which they themselves are shared with that particular concerned country which is doing research on that particular pandemic. I believe there will be more cooperation in medical and health field, because everybody is affected, and they will understand that health is one of the major denominators which can bring countries together. But let's see how China is treated in the coming days, because the more longer this Wuhan suffering is, the bad prospects it will be for China at global stage. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. My last question, this is by Mohammad Shehzad Islam. His question is how the foreign policy of a country which has been same since decades change with the new particular government, like India's foreign policy towards Israel and Saudi's foreign policy towards Israel. Your take on this, sir?
If you look into India's foreign policy with regard to Israel, it changed in 1990s itself. And there were two, three very basic factors which really compelled us to really change our policy towards Israel. One was basically military and from intelligence point of view. With the dissolution of Soviet Union, we were very hard pressed with regard to spare parts of our military aircraft and all those things. Israel was the one which came ahead and said, "We will provide you the spare parts." Now, in this regard, whenever the military is under problem areas, you look for whichever is the best shop or the best destination to get spares so that your aircraft and other machinery is fully operational in this regard. The second aspect of this, that with the dissolution of Soviet Union itself, the compulsions was how to really engage one of the very formidable technologically independent countries of the world, and Israel has done wonderful with regard to technology. And with regard to Israel itself, our basic problem was we were very much friendly with regard to Palestine objective, and we are one of the few countries which have given Palestine an embassy space in India, and it is operating in the Satya Marg. And we think that we are very much in tune with the Palestine objective for finding a homeland for these people who have been traumatized and have suffered a lot. While on the other hand, our engagement with Israel is with regard to two, three major issues. First is military equipment and support. Second is agriculture. Third is with regard to technology that they have developed, which is remarkable. And the fourth is with regard to few of the niche products that they have created with regard to access control, with regard to border wide fencing and all those things. And this we have been getting from Israel. Mind it, Israel is not our strategic partner. In comparison to that, we have Iran as a strategic partner, China as a strategic partner, even Saudi Arabia now is a strategic partner, which clearly shows that how we have tailor-made our approach with regard to this. Your second questions talk about Saudi Arabia and Israel. I'm not a very West Asia expert, so I might not be very much placed with regard to talking about Saudi Arabia-Israel relationship per se as such. But I believe the strongest denominator that the two countries have is US, and therefore both of these countries are somehow accepted the relationship that is between Israel and Saudi Arabia, and is because of the fact that Israel is a formidable country which has a past where it has really challenged the might of the Arab states at one point of time, while Saudi Arabia understandably knows that the adversarial relations between Israel and Iran is to their own benefit, because if Iran and Israel come to war at any point of time, the Saudi Arabia will emerge as a big regional player in that complete area itself. And I believe, again, once again buttressing this sale fact, that the national interests are more paramount than any regional or international interest at a particular situation, not always. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Jha, and it was a very informative session. And personally, for me, these webinar series by JSIA and JGU is, very exciting because one, it keeps us occupied during this lockdown, and second, the topics are so interesting that you feel like going back and doing a little more research even after all the presentations and all the informations. And that's the whole reason why I see so many students, applicants, parents, who might have work, or they must be working from home, but still they are taking out time to log into our webinars and attend and listen to some of our faculty's conversation and presentation. So I would like to thank all the participants, including the parents, school principals and counselors who have also joined us, and the students, of course, because I think this lockdown has brought in everyone onto this online platform, wherein we are able to share a lot of informations in a much easier and quicker way. So with this, I would also like to inform you that we have our next webinar on 27th of April, and this is a very interesting topic. The topic of the webinar, though you would be receiving an invite, but I just wanted to disclose the topic. It's everything is political, but what politics is really. So this is the topic, and it's very interesting. It would be conducted by Dr. Shweta Sen. She has recently joined in the School of International Affairs, and I have gone through her presentation, and I would really want you all to participate on 27th. We will send you the invitation again. And yes, we look forward to receive your appreciation, your participation, because this is what keeps us going and helps us getting more webinars organized for you. So thank you so much once again. Be safe, take care of yourself. If you have any questions related to the admissions, but thankfully, and I am not getting a lot of questions on admissions. I think I've already we have answered your doubts. But yeah, still, if you have any questions related to admissions process or anything, please write in, get in touch with us, write to me or my team, and we would be happy to answer those questions for you. Thank you so much, Dr. Jha. This is the third webinar conducted by you,
Fourth,
and
fourth. It's a fourth
uh,
one.
fourth webinar. Yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Fourth webinar by you. And your topics have always been interesting, and we look forward to have a couple of more from you on such interesting topic. Thank you so
Sure,
much, and
sure.
have a good day, everyone.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, everybody. Bye bye. Thank you.
Bye.